Razing an abuser's life to the ground. Alright, I've been waiting to unleash this one. I met Mark when I was 18, working for a magic shop for school. At the time, I was very gothic and wore clothes to align with that. On the day, I was wearing a black dress with a white blouse beneath, unbuttoned at the top because it was summer in the South. I did not have my chest exposed, save for the spot just above my cleavage. Well, I happened to notice as I'm walking by multiple times a day, this person is staring at me. I finally saw it the last time and turned around really quickly, saying what? Flabbergasted, he shook his head and couldn't come up with anything to say. I mean, damn, take a picture if you're that fascinated. I went back to the magic shop and mostly forgot about the incident. Eventually, I get a formal introduction to Mark. He cracks some awful jokes, ranging from cringy to perverse, and I'm used to being around guy friends, so I found it funny and harmless. The flea market vendors took up with me pretty quickly, and became like an odd family. At least half of a fairly big flea market knew me personally. So, even when I wasn't working at the magic shop anymore, I would still go every weekend to visit everyone. Eventually, a lot of vendors in some of the places I would visit moved on for whatever reason. The magic shop was closed, their good friend, and mine, taking over the space to open an airbrushing business. The last time I worked in a committed capacity out there was when there was a comic shop. So, thinking him my friend, I would go and sit and hang out with Mark some weekends when I could make it. For years, he continued to make me believe he was my friend. One day, I am out of medicine and do not have the money to get it. I approach Mark and ask if I can earn it from him by working for him for the day. He agrees and tells me to go into the booth at the back and start helping him organize. Thinking nothing of it, I go. He sells magazines of the pornographic nature, weekly ones, and regular ones. There's a ton of everything everywhere. I'm working away and eventually notice he's coming toward the booth. I figured he was just looking to be sure I was making progress, so I turned around and kept working. The next thing I hear is the garage door at the front of the booth behind me being pulled down. Okay, maybe he's got something to tell me in private. I finish up the stack I'm working on and turn toward him. Mark is a big guy and muscular at the time. The path into the back is narrow. I was working to get all the way to the back and work forward, back out of the garage door. The back door exit is inaccessible and locked anyway. I asked him what was up, and he says the only way he'll let me out and pay me is if I perform sexual acts on him. I kind of laughed, thinking it was another tasteless joke. He wasn't kidding. He wouldn't get out of the way, and thanks to all the noise in his magazines, no one could hear me screaming. I finally gave in, just to get out of there. He finished and threw the money at me, but more importantly, he opened the garage door. I was immediately ashamed of myself, and felt like I was a whore. I left in a huge hurry while he had his back turned helping customers. I didn't tell anyone because I was afraid it was somehow my fault. They wouldn't believe me, you name it. I thought there was nothing I could do. I didn't want to be painted as a whore. Incredibly embarrassed, and hoping it would stop him from telling anyone what happened, I would show up every now and again on weekends and pretend as if nothing happened. I would talk to him like normal. I would pretend as if it never happened. He asked me when I was going to work again, and I said I was okay, I didn't need to. I never went close to the open garage door of his booth again. Fast forward a little while, years, and he has said a few key things to me. He has bragged about lying to the IRS about his take-home amount. I have been present all day long to know the amount of sales he has multiple different times of the year. He has bragged about large orders. He has also told me all about his eBay business. Next, all through my 20s, I was in bad relationship after bad relationship. I was even married twice, 2 different abusive men. I brought these people out to the flea market to ensure they could see a small part of what I enjoyed for so long. I even confided in Mark, stupid, I know, that I had been SA'd in the past by 4 different people. I guess this solidified that he thought I was a weak female in his mind. Fast forward until I turned 28. I can feel my mental stability slipping due to a multitude of factors, and I made the decision to get some help. I'm married to my second abusive husband at this point. During therapy, I get myself medicated and I begin to work on me. I never mentioned Mark's actions, but I do mention other SA. I'm then finding myself with 3 therapists: Sister Care, Abused Women's Group, a sexual trauma therapist, and a regular therapist. I'm on a care level 4, meaning I had to show up every week to every appointment, or I was getting phone calls. The sister care therapist spoke to me on the phone each time for our sessions. Anyway, it takes a large amount of time to begin healing through positive coping mechanisms and challenging my brain. I was diagnosed with bipolar, PTSD, BPD, anxiety, and depression. My husband at the time was a narcissist and emotionally abusive with gun obsession and anger issues. When my husband began accusing me of cheating, wouldn't let me sleep in the bed, tried taking my phone, and tried to get me to record all my therapy sessions so he could hear them, it was time to set up my plans and leave. I found out that within months of our required year separation for divorce, he was cheating the whole time, and his girlfriend was now pregnant. I didn't care, I just wanted to be rid of him and have my maiden name back. I moved back in with my parents, who live right near the flea market. So, I begin going out there again. This time, I'm not even sitting down at Mark's when I talk to him despite him trying to get me to. My mother is bipolar as well and unmedicated, having kicked me out several times when I was younger and generally treated me like shit. I couldn't stay in the same house with her for long. I moved in with a friend that I eventually dated. This guy didn't tell me about certain things he wasn't interested in for the relationship beforehand, and wound up hurting me with that, but I figured I could stick with it because I didn't feel like I deserved any better. I suffered for months, having no support from him, and my emotions and effort toward the relationship slowly stopped as well. I was slowly destroying myself, living a lie. The first person I had ever loved but never got the chance to date got in contact with me out of the blue, and we began to talk as friends. He was doing a lot of impressive photography, and I was pursuing becoming an author. I asked if I could pay him to take some professional photos to put on my site, where I lived, and he said he could do that for free. It took some time to set up this appointment, as he was also working full-time as a crew leader in electrical. He would talk with me every spare moment he had. Soon enough, I decide I am worth more than keeping how I feel secret and simply dealing with what cards fell. I decided to tell the man I was living with I was leaving. I told my friend that I had always loved him, but I thought he was happy. He was married with 3 kids the last time I looked him up years prior. Come to find out, he was out of that relationship, thanks to the fact that his wife abandoned his sons with her parents and moved across the country to pursue a homosexual relationship. To be clear, I don't care about her choice in partners. What I cared about is that as a mother, she literally uttered the words to more than one person that to be in a lesbian relationship, I'm happy to abandon my kids. More than one person has heard her say that. I went out on a limb and told my friend it was always him. I had always loved him, and it was my only regret in life that I hadn't said it sooner. When he reciprocated my feelings almost immediately, I could have died happily right then. Back to my parents I went, and I began dating my friend. He's everything I ever dreamed of and hoped for, and I feel happy for the first time in many years. I'm still in therapy, and my mental health is improving so much that I'm only seeing one therapist once a month. Our relationship blossoms, and happy to share something with him I enjoy, I invite him to go to the flea market with me to look at the different vendors. Inevitably, I introduce him to Mark. He acted like he was happy for me and us, and that was that. My boyfriend mentions that Mark makes him feel a little uneasy, considering he sells pornographic materials and has a girl under 18 working for him. To clarify on her, he had been babysitting her and her brother when she was under 7 years old. Back then, I was at the flea market a lot and witnessed Mark blatantly selling adult materials in front of her, but basically normalizing it and keeping it quiet because he gave them snacks and toys. When I introduced my boyfriend to Mark and she was there, she was 17 and her brother no longer came to the flea market. I've watched this girl grow up, and I can't have children of my own. She's the closest thing I had. I initially brush off my boyfriend's concern and don't mention why he's spot on about Mark. I'm still ashamed years later. I never even brought it up in therapy up to this point. My boyfriend and I faced a lot of upheaval early on in our relationship, and to be together, we chose to move in together at the offer of my parents when they learned about him and his situation. Well, that didn't last because my mom, again, bipolar, became insufferable despite us following every single arbitrary house rule like teenagers. We moved into an extended stay hotel together, and we were extremely happy, as was my senior dog. He loved my boyfriend from the second he met him, and he'd hated and even attacked my exes. For detail there, my dog is a shepherd/husky. He was extremely protective through all my past relationships, and he approves of my boyfriend. Never once has my dog liked Mark, despite my never being involved with him romantically. My boyfriend lost his job by no fault of his own. We were forced to move back in with my parents for a couple of months, but again, my mother caused us to leave. We were in another hotel and could thankfully afford it for a while, but things were definitely tight. We survived with a mini fridge and a microwave. Mark started to call me in the morning, oddly enough, always around the same time and only after my now fiancé had left. I was talking about little things and not getting into too much personal detail, but he did eventually hear me mention how expensive the hotel was and that we really wanted to get out of it. This was his opportunity. He offered me a room to rent in his house, under the guise of helping when we needed it. I brought the decision to my fiancé, and told him it was his choice. Making the decision to move into his home came on the agreement that we were paying $600 monthly, no utilities, and because we were both in college at the time, we fully paid $100 more for faster internet speed. Mark agreed to this as long as you guys live here. He never drew up a lease, and we haven't signed anything, but we were taking him on his word. He refused to do anything electronically and made us pay in cash because it would affect his SNAP, which he also did not report the appropriate income to. Things started to fall apart pretty quickly. We moved here in November 2022. He had the house uncomfortably hot, stating that he was cold. He has 3 wall-mounted ductless AC units, one being in our room. We slept with the window open all winter, not even using the heat at all. Mark would begin yelling randomly and throwing things, often late at night when my fiancé had to wake up at 4 a.m. for work or when he had already left and I was alone. We had a chair just inside our room for him to sit in and talk to us. He had a stroke in May of 2022 which he has recovered extremely well from, minus some small balance issues. He came in here to talk and at one point, drew his gun and sat it on his lap. He said he could shoot my dog right now if he wanted to. I immediately called him on it and told him not to threaten my dog. He said he was joking. 2 days later he comes back in and points his gun at my dog's head. I told him if he tried that, I'd be all over him. He said he'd just shoot myself and my fiancé, too. Again, when called on it, he diffused the situation saying he was joking again. No report was made. Let me take a moment to mention that I am disabled. I have been the entire time Mark has known me, and I have needed a caretaker. My fiancé took up that responsibility for the extra income, and every time I would ask him for anything, Mark had to comment on it. It's worth it to note as well that Mark had 2 mail-order brides that he married, and 1 woman from England that saw through him and left him as well. He has never had a successful relationship, and he has extremely misogynistic views on women and their place. At some point when he comes in to talk to us, he starts to mention some things. 1. The minor he is working for him at the flea market is turning 18 soon. He had apparently been contacted after his stroke by her mother who wanted to help him. He always told us that woman stole all of his things and berated him in public, just to gain our sympathy. The minor girl was not allowed to contact him after that, which he said hurt him. He asked me to text her for him, and because I wanted to be sure she was okay, I did text, but did not mention him. She was fine, doing well, becoming a senior in high school. I was very relieved to hear her say that. Mark makes mention almost every time we see him for a while that he hopes she shows up again. He also mentioned he was going to marry her. He's 63. One conversation he had with us was him showing us pictures on his phone that he took of his single female neighbor bending over without her knowledge. He then named over a dozen more women and presented similar pictures, some of which were underage. He saw no issue with this and I just rolled my eyes and looked away. What finally pushed me over the edge personally was an incident in April when he came home from working at the flea market on a Sunday, knocked on our door, and asked us when we could clean the AC filter. I had gotten food poisoning that day, so I was laying down next to my fiancé in bed. I said, "That's fine. Can we do it in an hour? I'm really sick right now." He kept saying it needed to be done now. It finally pissed me off, and I said, "Why did you even ask when we could do it if you were going to tell us we had to do it now? Don't ask us if you know you want something done right away." When I fell quiet, I guess he assumed everything was fine. He was talking to my fiancé at this point, telling him he's going to start paying half of the internet. I stopped speaking too, interacting, and acknowledging Mark's existence. No matter where he was, what he said, I wouldn't talk to him. He asked my fiancé about it, thinking the filter was the whole reason why. I didn't engage. Instead, I started researching a few different laws and statutes in my state. I'm still in therapy at this point, and I tell my therapist everything. Except for the initial time he took advantage of me. I begin gathering resources that are available to me, and I don't speak to Mark the whole time. He has started talking to my fiancé instead of trying with me because it gets him nowhere. At one point, he asked my fiancé if he felt I was taking advantage of him. Of course, the answer is no. He then asks if my fiancé thinks my disability is worse than his. Again, my fiancé deflects and says that's not something for anyone to decide. He consistently tried to make remarks like this to try and drive a wedge between myself and my fiancé. It doesn't work. Several months pass, and my fiancé begins to have health issues. He is forced to take a leave of absence from his main job, which puts a financial strain on us. However, he is still making weekly payments toward our rent here. Not once has Mark paid half of the internet, nor did he send the old modem back, causing his bill to consistently be late because he expected us to simply keep paying it. He brags during this time about how he has taken out thousands of dollars in savings, which would effectively disqualify his SNAP as much as anyone knowing about our rent contributions. He then tells my fiancé he has made $2,000 in sales as he's getting a bunch of different magazines together. That amount came directly from the house. It did not make a dent in the hoard. Our rent transactions are made with cash and never documented. In a month, I started noticing that some important papers and things were either moved, out of place, or simply gone. I brought it up to my fiancé, and he tried to calm me by saying I might have just misplaced them. Sure, I'm on meds that can give me brain fog sometimes, but I was still uneasy. So, my fiancé being the brilliant man he is, he figured out a free app that used a phone as a camera, complete with motion activation. Within 10 minutes of setting that up and going to the grocery store, Mark was in our room. Prior to this, he had spent a long time repeating that he wouldn't enter the room when we weren't here and absolutely never without our permission. At first, him coming in was benign, he was just looking around. At this point, He had made us so uncomfortable around him that we had a hot plate in our room and rarely ever left it anymore unless we had an appointment. We hit it every time before we left. Once he was in our room and my fiancée saw it. The gloves were off. He opened the door on a second occasion completely naked, trying to figure out if anyone was here. I can only imagine he thought I was here alone. We kept the camera secret and kept gathering evidence. Fast forward to Friday, and he tells my fiancée he wants to speak with him privately. My fiancée tries to get him to talk in the morning, but he blows it off and says he has to get something from his female neighbor's house, who babysits his small dog on the weekend. Same neighbor we didn't know the name of for the longest because he would only refer to her as sweet ass. I had already received a call at this point that we are in line for an income-based apartment that is still being built. It will be available in October. Thus, we were biding our time. At this point, I tell my fiancée about what Mark did to me in his back room. Understandably upset, my fiancée has had enough. Once I talked to my therapist on Thursday, I finally feel ready to stand up to my abuser. Back to Friday, after waiting the entire day, he texts my fiancé and tells him he's ready to talk. My fiancé decides to voice record him. He tells him he wants him to sign a lease, and our rent is increasing to $175 a week. This would basically force us to pay every bill he has on our limited income. He asked my fiancé if he thought I would sign it, and my fiancé said that was something he had to ask me himself. When I heard the voice recording, I said I was going to break my silence and tell Mark exactly how I felt. He was sitting in his computer room and I said, "Mark, I'm not signing that lease of yours, and I'll tell you why. You have entered our room several times without our permission, and you haven't stopped. I don't know what you're looking for, but you even opened the door naked." He immediately said I was full of shit and I told him we had a camera. I told him we had evidence. It took me repeating it 3 times for him to get it, and then his tune changed. He said he was only checking on my senior dog. This was him fully admitting to being in our room. The video shows my dog on one side of the room, completely asleep while Mark is on another, clearly looking at everything we have. Mark is close enough to me now that he could have touched me. I asked him why he hadn't told anyone about what he did to me when I was trapped in his back room, and he acted like he was playing a violin. If I hadn't been standing in front, my fiancé might have attacked him then. He said, "You need to listen," as if he was about to silence me. I said no, you need to listen. I've even talked to your friend B about all the awful things you've said about him, and he hates you for it. He didn't believe me. He then said we had to be out in 30 days after I turned and went to walk back into our room. He tried to follow and repeated 30 days, and I smiled when I looked at him. I said fine, now fuck off, and slammed the door in his face. On just Friday night and Saturday alone, I started putting my research to use. My state has no time limit on reporting sexual abuse. I have reported him to the county he lives in, and the one he works in, successfully opening police files in both. I contacted the Department of Social Services about the hoard and us paying him rent, which would more than disqualify him for SNAP, and he will be reported to APS, who have to investigate these cases in 24 business hours. He has been reported to the Firearms and Explosives Commission for threatening us with his gun. I reported the hoard to the city with all the detail and proof I could send. The cops observed and documented the hoard because I contacted the Department of Public Safety. The officer warned that if the city investigates, the house will be condemned. I texted the minor girl and told her about him, and he'll never see her again. She has already been the victim to trauma of her own. She doesn't need more. I have reported him to the IRS for not reporting all his income. I have even written a letter to deliver to his female neighbor about his pictures of her and what he has called her. There is no way in this situation that he isn't royally fucked. If one thing fails to bring him down, the next will spring. Everything is documented. Finally, if he whines about the camera in our room or the voice recording, my state is a one-party consent state when it comes to recording. He doesn't have to consent to it. We did. I will not be a silent victim anymore. Update 1. I reported his behavior and everything to the flea market, told them about the minors, and let them know I had a police case open. I told them I could happily provide a case number if they needed it to the local police. I told them I would be updating that case to include the information about the minor children and pictures. Once I do that, I will be ready to press charges. It's technically Monday, 5 a.m. now. Every single place I reported to will open, and someone may see the reports as soon as today. I remained anonymous through all the reporting. He will have no physical evidence to challenge me. He came home yesterday and was fairly quiet when he did. I will update again as soon as anything happens. Update 2: There has been a detective assigned to my 2013 SA case. Unfortunately, because it was so long ago, there can be no prosecution unless Mark admits guilt. The detective plans on calling him tomorrow to attempt to get him to confess. I had another police officer friend tell me not to underestimate the detective's ability to whittle him down, so I'm going to have a tiny shred of faith that he'll do his best to get the confession. Then again, I do know Mark and how manipulative he is. He's never wrong, and it's always woe is him. Despite seeing him distribute the CP, it's not strong enough for him to get a search warrant. Despite his having exposed children to spicy material, he cannot prosecute. Despite all the pictures, including minors, he said it was creepy, but it's not illegal. Cops came to the house today. They asked about the drawing of the firearm, and because it did not happen yesterday or today, they cannot prosecute. The hoard is not something criminal. They can do nothing about it because it's in a residential home. They told me if I felt unsafe, just give them a call back immediately and do not wait. Cops also came to the house on Saturday, observing the hoard, and told me that if code enforcement came, they would condemn the home. I sent an email to code enforcement and a message to DSS today. I feel a bit defeated as he is going to get away for the SA in 2013, but maybe he will face some repercussions from the actual flea market. I have no way of knowing. Update 3. Mark attempted to serve only me, not my fiancé, with a writ of trespass today, which would effectively remove me from the property by 5 p.m. So, we decided to go to the magistrate to submit evidence that we were renting, not trespassing. Lo and behold, he's there. He was trying to get a hearing with a judge alone so he could lie through his teeth about what was going on. During the hearing, the judge asked some questions about the situation and Mark told the judge that all he did was want a lease signed because his light bill went up. We didn't use the heat all winter long, and I can't control my body temperature properly because I have no thyroid. It's not far-fetched for me to ask for the AC to be on during 90+ degree days. I will get overheated and faint if it is not. Plus, there is a senior dog in here, my registered ESA. Regardless, our agreement was $600 a month, no utilities, no lights, paid weekly because he needed the money. He doesn't need the money, he makes hundreds each weekend, which he blows every Thursday on more magazines he brings into the hoard of the house. We needed faster internet for school, so he had us pay the internet in full. He never sent back the old modem, which we also paid for the entire time. Due to that negligence, the bill kept getting higher, and we couldn't pay it. He still didn't pay his fair half. Finally, he dropped the speed, but he's never going to find the old modem. Finally, at the magistrate, he attempted to tell the judge that people I rented from before spoke to him and told him I was a nightmare. I don't have a rental history at all. One of the people was an ex that did not end on good terms with me. Of course he's going to say bad things. The other was a former friend who also ended on bad terms with me. Again, of course he's going to say bad things. I told the judge I don't have a rental history, ma'am. Just a history of bad decisions. He also tried to lie and say we didn't know each other beyond tenant/landlord. I would have been this man's friend for 20 years about 4 years from now. He attempted to say when he asked us to sign a lease that all hell broke loose and I cussed him up and down, as though he had not cussed me out as well. That's fine, you want to paint me as the villain, I'll be the villain. He just doesn't know the shitstorm that's still coming. I told the judge I really don't mind getting out of there, as I don't want to be there any more than he wants me there. All I was asking for was a little bit more time. The judge granted me until next Wednesday, but I believe we're going to pack up and live in our cars for a night or so while we sort out housing. Shit situation, yes, but we're going to sort it all out quickly. I have 2 offers, one in the state of SC and one in the state of NC. Anyway, I was also informed by a good friend, my second mom, really, that the whole flea market now knows about him and his predatory, shitty ways. No one has been left out of knowing what happened. The office knows, all the vendors know, his reputation is in ruins, and he's blissfully ignorant to it. I can't wait to see what that does, honestly. He'll probably leave it. Also, the office passed a new policy. No more sales of adult materials. That's his whole business, up in smoke. His whole polished reputation since 1993, up in smoke.